the sound of a cassette tape clicking into place, the soft mechanical whir as you press rewind, the faint static of a television warming up before the picture appears. It's 7:42 p.m. The streetlights flicker on. You're still outside. No GPS, no tracking, no text message from your parents. Just a quiet agreement with the world. Be home when it gets dark. You run back barefoot, grass on your feet, keys hanging around your neck. The house is empty. The air feels still. The refrigerator hums. You make your own snack and sit on the kitchen counter swinging your legs. No one taught you this was resilience. It was just normal. You learned how to wait, how to entertain yourself, how to swallow fear when the news talked about distant wars and nuclear threats. You learned independence before you learned emotional vocabulary. And maybe, just maybe, that's why you are the way you are today. If you grew up in the 1980s, your childhood wasn't just a timeline of pop culture. It was a psychological training ground. You were raised between two worlds, an analog childhood and a digital adulthood. And that tension, that quiet adaptability, still lives inside you, you know what I mean? Because sometimes you feel incredibly capable, and other times strangely alone. Sometimes you thrive in chaos, and other times the modern world feels too loud, too fast. The 1980s didn't just shape your memories, they shaped your nervous system, your coping mechanisms, your definition of strength. And tonight, we're going to understand exactly how. Not with nostalgia, not with cliches, but with psychology. Let's go back, not to relive it, but to finally understand it. You forget your house key. There's no phone in your pocket, no way to text your parents, so you sit on the front steps and wait. You don't panic, you don't cry, you just figure it out. That was the rhythm of childhood in the 1980s. You were trusted early, sometimes too early. You were given freedom and expected to handle it. Now fast forward, you're an adult, capable, self-sufficient, reliable. The one people call when things fall apart. But here's the quiet truth. You rarely call anyone when you fall apart. You tell yourself, it's fine. You say, I'll deal with it. You push through, because that's what you learned. Imagine this. You're overwhelmed at work, deadlines, notifications, endless emails. You feel the pressure building in your chest. But instead of saying, I need a break, you double down. Work harder, stay later, fix it yourself. You know what I mean? There's this deep-rooted instinct. If I can handle it alone, I'm safe. And that instinct made sense back then. Many 80s kids were what we now call latchkey children, coming home to empty houses, microwaving dinner, watching TV until someone walked through the door. No one called it emotional independence. It was just Tuesday. But here's the thing, when you grow up managing yourself, you don't always learn how to lean on others. You become strong, but strength can quietly turn into isolation. And then there's the speed. You grew up in a slower world. Phone calls had cords. Photos had to be developed. If you wanted to talk to someone, you physically went to their house. Now, everything is instant. Replies are expected immediately. News cycles refresh every minute. Technology updates before you even understand the last one. Sometimes it feels like the world accelerated without asking you first. And you adapted, because that's what you do. You went from typewriters to smartphones, from VHS to streaming, from waiting days for information to drowning in it. Man, that's crazy when you really think about it. But adaptation takes energy. And sometimes the exhaustion you feel today isn't weakness. It's decades of psychological flexibility. There's also another layer. In the 1980s, emotions weren't always openly discussed. You might have heard, stop crying, toughen up, be grateful. Other people have it worse. So you learned to minimize your feelings, not because you didn't have them, but because expressing them didn't always feel safe or useful. Now as an adult, when someone asks, how are you really? You pause, because you're not sure how to answer. You're used to functioning, not necessarily processing. And here's the subtle struggle. You want connection, but vulnerability feels unfamiliar. You value loyalty deeply, but you don't always know how to articulate your needs. You crave simplicity, but you live in complexity. It's like your inner world was shaped for one era, and your outer world demands another. And sometimes you wonder, quietly, why does this feel harder than it should? Why do I feel strong and tired at the same time? Why can I survive almost anything, but struggle to slow down? If that resonates, just know this. There's nothing wrong with you. Your internal struggle isn't random. It's patterned. It's shaped. It's the echo of a childhood that trained you to be capable before it taught you to be comforted. And understanding that is where everything begins to shift. You were taught strength meant silence, but strength can also mean expression. You were taught resilience meant pushing through, but resilience can also mean knowing when to stop. You were wired for uncertainty, but you're allowed to rewire for connection. And here's something that might hit deeper. The reason you sometimes feel tired isn't because you're fragile. It's because you've been running an old survival program in a new environment. Constant vigilance, constant adaptation, constant competence. That's exhausting. Not because you're weak, but because you've been strong for a very long time. You know what I mean? There's also something powerful here. Growing up in the 1980s made you psychologically bilingual. You understand slowness. You remember life before algorithms. You know what it means to wait. That memory is an asset. In a world addicted to speed, you carry the blueprint of patience. In a culture obsessed with performance, you understand loyalty. In a digital landscape of noise, you remember silence. That's not outdated, that's rare. But evolution doesn't mean staying the same. It means adapting again, consciously this time. Instead of unconsciously surviving, you get to intentionally choose. You can keep the resilience, but soften the armor. You can keep the independence, but allow support. You can keep the discipline, but invite rest. You're not behind. You're not misaligned. You're not too much or not enough. You're a product of a transitional era, a bridge generation, and bridges carry weight, but they're not meant to carry it alone forever. The twist isn't that you need fixing. The twist is that you need updating, and updates don't erase the past. They integrate it. The child who waited quietly in an empty house, the teenager navigating cultural shifts, the adult managing modern chaos. They're all you, not broken versions, evolved versions. And once you stop trying to erase your wiring, you can finally start refining it. So now the real question becomes, what do you actually do with all this? Understanding your wiring is powerful, but insight without action just turns into another late-night thought spiral. Let's make this practical, grounded, doable, not a personality overhaul, just small psychological upgrades. 1. Practice safe dependence. You were trained to rely on yourself, so we're not going to rip that away. We're going to expand it. Pick one small thing this week, something low stakes. Ask someone for help. Share something slightly vulnerable. Say, hey, I'm actually feeling overwhelmed. Not dramatically, not theatrically, just honestly. When you do this, something subtle happens in your body. Your vagus nerve, remember, your internal calming cable, activates through social safety. Connection tells your nervous system you don't have to scan for threats alone. At first, it might feel uncomfortable, like you're breaking an old rule. That's okay. Discomfort doesn't mean danger. It just means your brain is updating. And honestly, letting someone show up for you can feel surprisingly relieving. 2. Reintroduce slowness on purpose. Your brain developed in a slower rhythm. Waiting wasn't optional. It was built into life. Now everything is instant, and your stress system never fully powers down. So give it deliberate pauses. Create one daily analog ritual. No phone, no multitasking, no productivity goal. Maybe you take a 20-minute walk without headphones. Write one page by hand. Listen to a full song without skipping. It sounds simple, but simplicity regulates the HPA axis, your stress thermostat. Slowness signals safety, and safety reduces that quiet background tension you've carried for years. Come on, you deserve moments that don't demand performance. 3. Update your inner language. Here's something subtle but powerful. You likely grew up hearing phrases like, "Don't be dramatic," "Handle it," "You're fine." Other people have it worse. Those scripts still echo inside, so let's rewrite them. When you feel stressed, instead of saying, "I should handle this," try, "It makes sense that this feels heavy." Instead of, "I don't need anyone," try, "It's okay to want support." This isn't about becoming fragile. It's about reducing internal conflict, because cognitive dissonance, that clash between be strong and I'm tired, drains energy. When your internal voice softens, the friction decreases and energy returns. 4. Redefine strength. This one matters. You were raised to equate strength with endurance, but modern psychological strength includes flexibility. Sometimes strength is saying no, sometimes it's resting, sometimes it's admitting you don't know. You're not betraying your upbringing, you're evolving it. Keep the resilience, keep the loyalty, keep the discipline, but remove the isolation, because strength without connection becomes exhaustion, and strength with connection becomes sustainability. Here's the key. You don't need a new personality. You need a nervous system that feels safe in today's world. Small changes, repeated gently. That's how neuroplasticity works. Your brain adapted once, it can adapt again. And this time, you get to choose the direction. Here's the paradox. The generation that learned to survive without constant connection now lives in the most connected era in human history, and yet sometimes feels the most alone. You grew up knocking on doors instead of sending texts. You waited days for letters. You memorized phone numbers like survival codes. Now your entire social world fits in your pocket, and still something feels different. Because connection isn't the same as access, and strength isn't the same as peace. You were taught to handle things, so you did. You handled change. You handled responsibility. You handled silence. But here's the uncomfortable question. When was the last time you let yourself be handled? That's the paradox. The very skills that made you capable may now be the skills that keep you guarded. The independence that once protected you may now quietly isolate you, and the resilience that carried you through decades of transformation may be the reason you rarely slow down long enough to feel. But evolution doesn't discard old strengths, it refines them. You don't need to become someone else. You don't need to reject your childhood. You don't need to erase the version of you that learned to sit alone in a quiet house and be okay. That version of you was brilliant, truly, but now you're allowed to expand. You can keep the independence and add interdependence, keep the resilience and add rest, keep the loyalty and add openness. It's not about undoing who you are. It's about integrating who you've been. Because here's something powerful. The world didn't just change around you. You changed with it. You are living proof of psychological adaptability. From cassette tapes to cloud storage, from rotary phones to video calls, from waiting to instant everything. Man, that's not small. But maybe the next evolution isn't technological, maybe it's emotional, maybe the next upgrade isn't about speed, it's about softness. So tonight just sit with this thought. If strength helped you survive the past, what would help you truly live in the present? Let that question linger. And if something in this video felt uncomfortably accurate, like it was describing your inner wiring, you're not alone in that. Share one memory from the 1980s that shaped you, not just culturally, but emotionally. Let's create a space where resilience and vulnerability can exist side by side, because maybe the strongest thing you can do now is evolve again.